I could almost predict the words before they left Tom's mouth. "I have to stay late at the office." He said it so often it felt rehearsed, like a line in a play he no longer cared to hide. At first, I believed him. He had always been ambitious, proud of how hard he worked. But lately, those words stung. Dinners went cold, the bed stayed empty, and I was left staring at the ceiling, wondering when our marriage had turned into silence. Each excuse felt like another brick in a wall he was building between us. Nights became lonelier than I ever thought possible. I'd set the table for two, light candles just to make the room feel less empty, and end up eating alone. The sound of my fork scraping the plate was louder than it should have been, echoing in the hollow of my chest. Friends asked where Tom was, and I found myself repeating his excuses as if they were mine. But a whisper kept creeping in. Was he really at work? Or was the office just a cover for something else? That whisper started to feel more like a scream. I've never been one to accuse without proof. My mother taught me patience, to watch closely and act when the time was right. But my patience was wearing thin. Every unanswered call, every late-night arrival, chipped away at my trust. One night, staring at the untouched pillow beside me, I made a decision. If the office was where Tom spent his life, then I would bring the life back to him. Coffee, dinner, and a surprise visit. Little did I know that choice would open a door I wasn't ready to walk through. That afternoon, I stopped by our favorite little Italian place. The smell of garlic and fresh bread instantly reminded me of better days, those early years when Tom and I couldn't wait to share a meal together. I ordered his favorite pasta, picked up 2 coffees, and told myself this would be a sweet gesture. Maybe he'd smile, maybe he'd kiss me on the forehead and thank me for thinking of him. Maybe, just maybe, we could feel like us again, even if just for 5 minutes. I needed that hope to hold on to. Driving to his office, my hands gripped the wheel tighter than I realized. My heart was racing, not from excitement, but from something sharper, something unsettled. What if he didn't appreciate it? What if he seemed annoyed? The thought made my stomach twist, but I pushed it down. I kept telling myself I was just being paranoid. Every marriage had rough patches, right? This was my way of fighting for ours. With every red light I stopped at, I rehearsed how I'd surprise him, how casual and cheerful I'd sound. When I finally pulled into the parking lot, the building looked colder than I remembered. Tall glass windows, glowing in the night, reflecting a life I wasn't sure I belonged in anymore. Balancing the food in my hands, I took a deep breath and whispered to myself, "Just smile. Just be his wife." My heels clicked against the pavement as I walked to the front doors, each step heavier than the last. I told myself it was just nerves, but deep inside, I think I already knew the truth was waiting for me on the other side. Inside, the office was eerily quiet. The hum of fluorescent lights and the faint buzz of a copier down the hall filled the silence. I clutched the bag tighter, the smell of warm pasta drifting out as if it might comfort me. A receptionist looked up, surprised, but I smiled politely and said I was just dropping something off for my husband. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She pointed me toward the elevators, and as the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls, nervous, hopeful, and maybe a little scared. When the elevator dinged, I stepped out into the carpeted hallway. Each door was shut, each plaque marked with neat golden letters, but I didn't need directions. I knew Tom's office by heart. Still, my pace slowed, almost as if my body wanted to delay what my mind had already decided. My heart pounded, loud enough that I swore it echoed in the quiet corridor. I balanced the coffee cups in one hand and steadied myself. Just a smile, just a hello, I repeated in my head. I was his wife. I had every right to be there. I knocked lightly, then pushed the door open, rehearsed smile ready. "You've been working so hard, Tom," I said, my voice warm but my eyes searching his face. "I thought a warm meal might cheer you up." His head snapped up, startled, almost guilty. "Kelly? You didn't need to come. I'm swamped with work," he stammered, shifting in his chair. My smile held, but I leaned in just slightly. "Too busy for 5 minutes with your wife? Just tell me where your office is. That's when the first crack in his excuse showed itself. I followed Tom down the hall, my heels sinking into the carpet, the smell of coffee still clinging to my hands. He seemed restless, walking a little too quickly, glancing over his shoulder as though he wanted to lose me in the maze of offices. Something about the way his shoulders tightened made my stomach drop. He wasn't leading me to his desk at all. Instead, he pushed open the door to a conference room, and that's when I saw her, Sophia. She was perched casually on the table, laughing, her hand brushing against his arm like it belonged there. For a second, the air left my lungs. The sight was ordinary enough for colleagues, yet everything in me screamed it wasn't. The way they sat too close, the way their laughter filled the room with a kind of intimacy I hadn't felt with Tom in months. I froze at the doorway, still holding the pasta and coffee like a fool. My heart begged me to storm in, but my body stayed still, pinned to the shadows. I needed to see more. I needed to hear it, undeniable and clear, before I opened my mouth. So I pressed myself against the wall, listening. Sophia's giggles echoed like knives, slicing through the silence I once called home. "If Kelly knew what you really do during overtime," she teased, her voice dripping with mockery. Tom smirked, leaning closer. "Relax," he whispered. "She believes every word." My hands trembled, the coffee nearly spilling, but my voice came before I could stop it. Cold, sharp, and louder than I intended, I stepped forward and said, "Not anymore." Tom's head whipped around so fast I thought he might snap his neck. His face drained of color, caught between shock and guilt. "Kelly, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered, words tumbling over themselves. Sophia's smirk faltered, her hand sliding off his arm as if burned. I set the food down on the nearest chair, my movements calm, deliberate, even though inside my chest a storm was raging. My voice was ice when I cut him off. "Save it. I just wanted to see you at work. Now I wish I hadn't." The silence that followed was deafening. Tom stood, his hands half raised like he could block the truth with gestures. Sophia, bold a moment ago, suddenly looked small, her eyes darting anywhere but mine. I watched them both squirm, a bitter taste rising in my throat. I had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways, but none of them came close to the sting of actually living it. The betrayal wasn't in just what they were doing. It was in the laughter, the ease, the way I no longer existed in his world. I refused to give them a scene, refused to give them the satisfaction of watching me crumble. So I straightened my shoulders, gathered what little pride I had left, and let my words do the cutting. "Enjoy your overtime," I said coolly, turning toward the door. I could feel Tom's panic trailing after me, his footsteps quick, his voice desperate. But I didn't stop. My heels clicked against the floor like a metronome, steady and unbroken, each step carrying me farther from the lie he'd built. "Kelly, wait!" Tom's voice echoed behind me, but I didn't give him the courtesy of turning back. My hand pushed open the heavy glass door, and the cool night air rushed over me like a release I didn't know I needed. My chest tightened, but I kept walking, each step steadier than the last. Inside, my heart was breaking, but outside, I made sure he saw only my spine straight and unshaken. If he wanted to live in shadows, then let him, because I was done stumbling in the dark. As I reached the car, the bag of food still in my hand, I caught sight of the 2 cups of coffee. One had my name scrawled across it, the other his. For a fleeting second, I almost laughed at the irony. I had brought warmth into a place that had already gone cold. Sliding into the driver's seat, I set the untouched dinner on the passenger side and gripped the wheel until my knuckles whitened. The betrayal replayed in my mind like a cruel film reel, her hand, his smirk, their laughter at my expense. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I wasn't going to waste tears on a man who thought I was blind. Instead, a different fire began to build, slow but steady. If Tom thought I'd simply walk away and pretend not to know, he didn't know me at all. I wasn't just a wife. I wasn't just someone to leave in the dark. And as I drove away from that building, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't finished. The real work, the kind he'd never see coming, was only about to begin. The ride home felt endless, headlights blurring past as if the world was rushing while I sat still. I pulled into the driveway, the house looming before me, our home, yet suddenly it felt foreign, tainted. I stepped inside, placed the cold food on the counter, and let the silence settle around me. My body ached to scream, to smash something, to demand answers, but I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. No, I would do something far more dangerous. I would stay quiet and prepare. I went straight to the study where Tom kept his files. Years of marriage had taught me his habits, how careless he could be when he thought no one was watching. I pulled open drawers, sifted through folders, and there it was. Bank statements, company reports, even credit card receipts that didn't match our life together. Each discovery was like fuel poured onto the fire inside me. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the sharp edge of resolve cutting deeper with every page I turned. Then I opened his laptop. Password? Child's Play. He had always underestimated me, assuming I wouldn't care enough to look. Within minutes, his emails painted the story I already knew, but now could prove. Dinners with Sophia, hotel reservations, messages sent at the very hours he'd claimed to be working late. I printed every single one, stacking them neatly as if building a case, because that's exactly what I was doing. He thought overtime was his excuse. Well, it was about to become mine too, only this time, the work was mine. By the time the printer spat out the last sheet, the floor around me looked like a battlefield of evidence. I gathered everything into a folder, slipping each page inside with the precision of someone who refused to leave loose ends. My heart was steady now, no longer racing with shock but beating with a quiet determination. Tom thought I'd collapse under the weight of betrayal. Instead, I was standing taller, stronger, because I had something far more powerful than his excuses. I had proof. Still, proof alone wasn't enough. I needed strategy. So I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where we once planned vacations and family dinners, and began planning something entirely different: his downfall. Every detail mattered: the timing, the delivery, the witness. I wasn't going to confront him in private. No, that would only end with more lies. He needed to be stripped of his mask in front of someone who held real authority, someone whose judgment could end more than just our marriage. That's when Mr. Harrington came to mind. Tom's boss respected him, trusted him, even bragged about his loyalty. The irony was almost too bitter to swallow. I pictured his face when he realized that his dependable employee was using the company as cover for deceit. The decision settled inside me like steel. I would set a meeting. I would place every piece of evidence on his desk, and when Tom's world began to crumble, he wouldn't even see me lifting a finger. The next morning, I called Mr. Harrington's office, my voice calm, almost casual, as if I were just another wife dropping by with a simple concern. His assistant patched me through, and within minutes, I had an appointment on his calendar. I hung up the phone and stared at the folder in front of me, its weight heavier than any weapon I had ever carried. This wasn't just paperwork. It was justice, waiting for its moment. When I walked into Mr. Harrington's office later that week, the air smelled faintly of leather and old books. He looked up from his desk, eyebrows lifted in polite curiosity. "Mrs. Carter, what can I do for you?" he asked, his voice warm. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. Instead, I slid the folder across the polished wood. "I think you should see how your employee spends his overtime." His face hardened with every page he read, the warmth draining as quickly as Tom's excuses had the night I caught him. By the time he finished, his jaw was tight, his hand gripping the edge of the desk. "Are you telling me he's been using company hours for this?" he demanded. I leaned back in my chair, steady as ever. "I don't need to tell you anything. You can read for yourself." Mr. Harrington slammed the folder shut, fury etched across his features. Unbelievable. I trusted him with clients, with our name. He's finished. I allowed myself the smallest smile. That's all I needed to hear. And just like that, the first domino was ready to fall. When the day of the meeting arrived, I dressed with intention. A tailored navy dress, heels that clicked with purpose, and a calmness in my posture that even I didn't recognize. Walking into the building, I felt like I was entering a stage where every detail had already been rehearsed in my mind. Tom didn't know yet. He thought it was just another workday. But I knew. And so did Mr. Harrington. The truth was waiting for him, sharp and undeniable. The conference room was cold, lit by those harsh fluorescent lights that make everything look more clinical, less forgiving. I sat at one end of the long table, hands folded neatly, while Mr. Harrington reviewed the folder I'd given him one last time. My pulse was steady. I wasn't the woman who had cried in her car that night. No, I was something different now. A woman with power, a woman who knew the end of a lie was always louder than the lie itself. The door swung open, and Tom walked in, oblivious. He gave me a quick glance, confusion flickering across his face, before he turned toward his boss with a rehearsed smile. "You wanted to see me, sir?" he asked, his voice confident. But Mr. Harrington didn't return the smile. Instead, he slid the folder across the table, his tone colder than I'd ever heard. "Yes, Tom. Care to explain these?" I watched Tom's hand hover uncertainly over the evidence, and for once he had no excuse ready on his tongue. Tom's eyes darted across the pages, the color draining from his face as if each word stole a piece of his confidence. It's not what it looks like," he began, his voice trembling, but Mr. Harrington's glare cut him down mid-sentence. I leaned back in my chair, crossing one leg over the other, my expression calm. "Funny," I said softly. "That's exactly what you told me the other night." His head snapped toward me, panic flashing, but I didn't flinch. I wanted him to feel every ounce of the spotlight he'd worked so hard to avoid. "Hotel charges, dinners, private emails on company time," Mr. Harrington recited, his voice cold, deliberate. "You weren't just betraying your wife, Tom. You were betraying this company." Tom opened his mouth again, but the words stumbled out, broken and weak. "Please, I can explain—" "Enough," Mr. Harrington snapped, his palm slamming the table. The sound echoed, final and unyielding. Tom's shoulders caved, his rehearsed excuses falling apart in front of the very man who once trusted him most. I could feel his desperation clinging to me as he turned back, his voice low, almost begging. "Kelly, say something, please." For a moment, I let the silence stretch, let him see that I owed him nothing. Then I tilted my head and met his eyes with a cold smile. "I just did." His lips parted, but no words came. The silence that followed was louder than any argument we had ever had, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't the one cornered. He was. Mr. Harrington rose from his chair, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You're done here, Tom. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out." The words landed heavy in the room, and for a second, I almost pitied him. Almost. Tom's mouth opened and closed like he was searching for air, for a lifeline that wasn't there. His eyes darted between me and his boss, wild with disbelief, as if this were some nightmare he'd wake up from. But no one was waking him, not this time. The door creaked open, and 2 men in security uniforms stepped inside. Their presence made everything real. Tom's protests rose in frantic waves, his voice breaking as he pleaded, "Please, just listen, I can fix this, I swear." His words bounced off the walls, empty and desperate, but no one moved to comfort him. Mr. Harrington stood firm, arms crossed, while I simply sat there, calm as a queen watching her opponent removed from the board. The balance of power had shifted, and he knew it. As the guards closed in, Tom's eyes found mine once more, raw and pleading. "Kelly, don't do this. Say something. Please." For a heartbeat, I let him see me, really see me, the woman he thought would always be waiting, always forgiving. Then I straightened, my voice steady, final. "I already said everything you needed to hear." The guards took his arms, and he stumbled toward the door, the man who once carried himself with pride now reduced to begging. And in that moment, I knew the collapse of his world was only just beginning. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old paper, a place where truth carried weight and lies collapsed under evidence. I sat tall beside my attorney, the folder of proof resting like a silent ally between us. Tom avoided my gaze, his once proud shoulders hunched, his tie loosened as though he'd already surrendered. The judge's words came steady, almost cold, as she outlined the prenuptial clause he had so carelessly ignored. Adultery meant forfeiture. Everything we had built together, the house, the accounts, the security for my future, was mine now. I should have felt guilty, maybe even hesitant. But I didn't. I remembered the nights alone at the dinner table, the laughter he shared with someone else while I waited in silence. This wasn't cruelty, it was justice. As the gavel struck, the sound reverberated like thunder, final and unyielding. Tom's face crumbled, his lips parting as though he might argue, but the law had spoken louder than either of us ever could. And for once I didn't have to fight. The truth fought for me. Walking out of the courthouse, the sun hit my face, warm and sharp, almost like a reward. I inhaled deeply, as if breathing in freedom for the first time in years. Tom trailed behind me, desperate, broken. "Kelly, don't do this. We can fix it," he begged, his voice raw. I stopped, turned, and met his eyes one last time. "You had your chance, Tom. Now I'm fixing my life without you." His silence followed me down the steps, heavy but powerless. For the first time, he had nothing left to say. Back home, the house felt different, lighter, freer, like it had shed the weight of lies that once lingered in every corner. I walked through the rooms slowly, letting my hand trail along the walls, imagining how I would make them mine again. No more waiting up for him, no more second-guessing what overtime really meant. I opened the curtains wide, letting the sunlight flood in, chasing away every shadow he'd left behind. This place wasn't a prison anymore. It was mine, and I intended to claim every inch of it. Boxes of his things were already gone, cleared out in neat piles, leaving behind only space for me to rebuild. I found myself humming softly, almost surprised by the sound of my own voice filling the silence. For years I had lived in the quiet of disappointment. Now, the silence was mine to shape, peaceful, not empty. I poured myself a glass of wine and wandered into the living room, curling into the couch with a comfort I hadn't felt in so long. The glass caught the light, sparkling like a promise of something better. My phone buzzed with a message from my closest friend. "Wine tonight? I'll bring dessert." I smiled, my chest warming in a way Tom hadn't managed to do for years. "Perfect," I typed back. It was more than a girls' night. It was a celebration, a ritual of freedom. I glanced around the living room, imagining the laughter, the clinking glasses, the sound of voices that actually cared. For once, I wasn't waiting for a husband to come home. I was waiting for joy to walk through the door instead. That evening, my friend arrived with a grin and a bottle of champagne, her arms already open for the kind of hug that tells you you're not alone. We sat at the kitchen table, once a place of quiet resentment, now alive again with laughter and warmth. She poured the bubbly into 2 tall glasses, the fizz rising like the life I felt surging back into me. "To freedom," she toasted, her eyes sparkling. I lifted my glass high, steady and certain. "And to men who think overtime is a good excuse, may they learn the hard way." We clinked glasses, the sound crisp and sweet, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight slide off my shoulders. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming myself, my voice, my future. The house echoed with something new that night, not the hollow footsteps of a lonely wife, but the laughter of women who knew their worth. Every sip tasted like victory, not over Tom, but over the version of me that had once accepted less than she deserved. Later, as I curled into bed, the sheets smelled of lavender, fresh and mine alone. No lies, no excuses, just quiet peace and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. Tom had lost everything, his career, his reputation, his marriage, and I had gained something priceless: freedom. I turned off the light, a small smile tugging at my lips. Tomorrow would be a new day, a brighter one, and this time, it would begin and end on my terms.